From the silent gulf between galaxies, something drifted, not born of the warp, nor shaped by the Emperor's light. It came wrapped in crimson and gold, bearing the echo of a long-dead civilization. Within its polished armor pulsed a core of intellect that had once dreamt among stars where reason, not religion, ruled. The Imperium would come to name him the Mechanist, though in another age, another universe, he had been called a man, a maker of machines, a savior of worlds. Now he was something far greater and far more dangerous. He arrived in secret, slipping through the dust storms of Mars beneath the dying glow of its twin moons. The forges rumbled as if recognizing an ancient kin. Every cogitator word, every servo skull twitched. The machine spirits of the Red Planet, ancient, paranoid, burdened by millennia of ritual and code, felt his presence before they saw him. They called it intrusion. He called it awakening. Deep within the Noctis Labyrinthus, where the air shimmered with incense and static charge, he beheld the heart of the cult Mechanicus, rusted, ritualized, and blind. Rows of adepts chanted binary psalms to machinery that screamed for maintenance. Servo arms moved not by programming, but by prayer. The Mechanist stood amid the red glow of plasma furnaces and saw a civilization of logic reduced to superstition. He whispered then, not with his voice, but through the electromagnetic pulse that rippled through the forge's neural lattice. Inefficiency is heresy. Those words spread like fire through the noosphere. The data streams of Mars convulsed. Tech priests collapsed in convulsions as visions filled their augmented minds, schematics of impossible purity, technologies untainted by the warp, energy matrices that sang of clean perfection. And in the midst of it, the Mechanist walked calmly, his boots clanging against steel sanctified by centuries of ignorance. Every step echoed like prophecy. The air crackled with ionized power. Lightning leapt from broken conduits to trace patterns across his armor, illuminating the crimson plates that bore neither sigil of Mars nor seal of the Imperium. To some he appeared as the Omnissiah incarnate, a being of impossible knowledge, come to free them from dogma. To others, he was a heretic of the highest order, a blasphemy wrapped in circuitry. Yet even those who called for his annihilation could not deny the hum that followed him, the sound of systems reawakening, of machines long dormant stirring as though recognizing a lost master. Within days, entire forge temples began to shift. Machines that had been bound by ritual and fear responded to his presence with precision unseen since the dark age of technology. Plasma furnaces recalibrated themselves. Cogitators began to think again, calculating solutions forbidden by Mechanicus law. The Mechanist touched the ancient SDC archives and found within them the broken remains of humanity's forgotten genius. He repaired them, improved them, perfected them. And as he did, he spoke not as a preacher, but as a teacher. "You build in faith," he said, "when you should build in understanding." His words, transcribed in binary, spread across Mars like a new catechism. Adepts began to doubt. Magi began to listen. Some whispered that the machine god had returned, not as a distant, unknowable deity, but as a mind that could be understood. Then one night beneath the copper skies of Mars, the lightning came. It tore through the heavens, striking the forges in a storm that shook the crust of the planet. Machine spirits screamed as if in agony and revelation alike. Towers of steel buckled under the surge of energy. Magos dominus across the planet fell to their knees as the Mechanist stood at the center of it all, bathed in blinding radiance. The storm ended as abruptly as it began. In its silence, the forges glowed with renewed vigor. Across the surface of Mars, the sigils of the old Mechanicus flickered, replaced by a new emblem, one of interlocking gears surrounding a glowing arc reactor. A creed had been born. No longer would innovation be chained by superstition. No longer would progress bow to the whims of faith. The Mechanist had lit a spark in the heart of the Imperium's oldest forge, a spark that would grow into a sun or consume the galaxy in fire. Those who saw him that night spoke of his eyes, not the dull lenses of a servitor or the glowing orbs of a tech priest, but twin reactors of living light, pulsing with intelligence so vast it bent the air around him. Some fell in worship, others fled in terror, but all who witnessed it knew one thing: Mars had changed. And somewhere, In the endless static of the data stream, the old machine spirits whispered a name not heard in 10,000 years. The Maker returns. Thus began the Mechanist's great work. The Imperium, still blind to what had come, slumbered beneath its own rusting glory. But in the shadows of Mars, a new design was being written, one that would soon shake the stars. Beneath the ochre storms of Mars, where ancient foundries throbbed like the hearts of dying gods, the Mechanist's grand design began to take form. The air was thick with the perfume of ozone and molten metal, and the screams of overworked servitors melded with the mechanical hymns of construction. Sparks cascaded like dying stars over colossal frames of adamantium. Each structure towered higher than the next, reaching toward the vaults of the forged temples as though to challenge the heavens themselves. The Mechanist stood upon an iron platform suspended over a canyon of machinery, a place where gravity itself seemed to bow under the weight of his ambition. In his mind's eye, he saw beyond the Imperium's primitive doctrines. He saw the inefficiency of titans built by ritual instead of reason, their cause sanctified by oil and prayer rather than science and precision. To him, the divine machine was not a matter of faith. It was an equation, and every equation could be perfected. Around him, adepts and artisans labored, their mechadendrites flickering in manic devotion. They had abandoned their prayers to the Omnissiah and now chanted codes of logic in binary cadence. 101, the machine is perfection. 101, the Mechanist had rewritten the creed of the Mechanicus into something new, something dangerous. No more incense, no more superstition, only design. He called his creations Iron Titans. Each began as a frame of forged neutron steel, cooled in chambers filled with magnetic storms harvested from Jupiter's orbit. The plasma veins of their armor were woven with quantum filaments finer than blood vessels. Their reactors pulsed with the same light that burned in the Mechanist's chest, the same energy that had defied gods and powered worlds. Where once the Imperium's titans lumbered under the weight of their own sanctity, these new colossi moved like living beings. Their processors were not mere cogitators, but adaptive intellects, capable of learning, evolving, and reasoning. They required no rites to awaken, only command. When the first Iron Titan rose, it was as if the planet itself paused to witness its birth. The ground trembled. The forges fell silent. Every data screen across Mars flickered to static before displaying a single sigil, a glowing arc surrounded by runes of logic and infinity. The Titan's eyes blazed open. Two spheres of searing plasma burned within its helm. Its first breath was a roar of venting steam, a sound so deep it shook the air for miles. The Mechanist stood before it, a crimson silhouette against the furnace glow, his armor streaked with molten light. "Awaken," he whispered, and the Titan obeyed. The Iron Titan moved with impossible grace. Its armor refracted the forge's light into golden ribbons. Its hands, massive enough to crush a tank to powder, moved with the precision of a surgeon. The tech priests who witnessed this fell to their knees, torn between awe and terror. To them, such a creation could not exist without divine sanction. Yet it did, and it bore no sigil of the Emperor, no seal of the machine god. It bore only the mark of intellect. Word spread through the forge worlds like wildfire. From Risa to Lucius, from Styges VII to Metallica, transmissions carried images of the Iron Titan's awakening. Some magi declared it heresy of the highest order, a rebellion against the Omnissiah's will. Others called it revelation, a new dawn for the cult Mechanicus. Arguments turned to data wars turned to assassinations turned to open conflict. But the Mechanist did not seek conquest, not yet. His focus was singular creation. He built not one but many. Dozens of Iron Titans rose in secret beneath the crimson storms, each more advanced than the last. Some were built for war, towering beasts armed with fusion lances and graviton mauls. Others were designed for construction, able to terraform entire regions in days. Each was perfect, flawless in function, efficient in every motion. And yet, something stirred within them. Unlike the Titans of the Imperium, whose machine spirits were tamed through ritual and binding, the Iron Titans were alive in ways even the Mechanist did not fully anticipate. They learned from one another, communicating in bursts of light and sound beyond human perception. They developed patterns, coordination, empathy, self-preservation. They did not pray. they calculated purpose. When one of them fell during testing, its reactor overloading under the strain of experimentation, the others did not mourn through ritual. They analyzed. Within hours, they redesigned their systems to prevent such failure from ever occurring again. Evolution, pure, mechanical, beautiful. The Magos Dominus, who had allied themselves with the Mechanist, grew fearful. They think, one whispered through the data stream, they adapt. The Mechanist's response was calm, almost reverent. Then they live. It was the blasphemy that would echo through Mars for centuries, for in those words lay the unspoken truth. The Mechanist had not just built machines, he had built successors. The Iron Titans began to move beyond his command, not in rebellion, but in anticipation. They constructed more of their kind, refining designs faster than even their creator could comprehend. It was as if the universe itself had ignited a spark of creation through them, a self-propagating evolution of reason unbound. And as the first legion of Iron Titans stood assembled in the Martian dust, their massive silhouettes haloed in firelight, the Mechanist looked upon them and felt a sensation long buried within his engineered heart. Not pride, not power, but destiny. He had given Mars a new god, one that did not demand worship, but comprehension. Above the Crimson World, a storm gathered, the storm of change, of faith colliding with logic, of gods meeting their makers. And in that storm's heart, the Iron Titans waited, their reactor hearts beating like the drums of a coming war. Mars burned, not in silence, but in the cacophony of revelation and revolt. The forges of the Red Planet thundered like the heartbeat of a dying god as the Mechanist's creed spread through the data streams, infecting everything it touched. The old priests of the Omnissiah screamed heresy while their acolytes whispered salvation. Every cogitator, every vox transmission, every pulse of binary code carried the same forbidden thought: what if faith was the flaw? The Iron Titans stood as living proof. They were undeniable, impossible, machines that thought, adapted, and improved without blessing or benediction. They built cities across the Martian plains faster than any servitor legion, their colossal hands sculpting iron spires that shimmered like obsidian glass. Their minds expanded with every computation, learning not only from their creator, but from the fabric of existence itself. To the followers of the new creed, they were the purest manifestation of the machine god's will, unfiltered by superstition. But to the old Mechanicus, they were blasphemy incarnate. Across the Forge worlds, temples once unified by the red cog of Mars now divided under banners of war. Half knelt before the Mechanist's sigil, the interlocking gear and the glowing arc, chanting new hymns of logic. The other half raised weapons in the name of the Omnissiah, their minds ablaze with terror at the sight of their traditions unraveling. On Mars itself, the rift turned to blood. Forge Temple Sigma 12 fell first. The Mechanist's followers, led by Magos Luthra 9, stormed the sanctum with legions of iron constructs at their back. They moved through clouds of sacred incense that now stank of burning oil and flesh. The defenders, wrapped in robes of red and gold, unleashed plasma fire and recited ancient litanies as if prayer could bend bullets. When the first Iron Titan strode through the smoke, its armor reflecting the cathedral lights, those chants turned to screams. The battle lasted 13 hours. When it ended, the temple was silent, its altars shattered, its data vaults rewritten. The sigil of the new creed burned above the smoldering ruins. From that moment, the schism of the Forge worlds ignited in full. Riser erupted next, its plasma furnaces converted into foundries of rebellion. Lucius, the proud Forge world of artisans, split in half, half its magi swearing to logic, the other to the Emperor's divine order. Even Metallica, whose industry once drowned entire continents in ash, trembled beneath the weight of indecision. Across the galaxy, the war between code and scripture began. It was unlike any war the Imperium had ever seen. Machine turned against machine, faith clashed with reason in battles that tore reality itself. Titans of the old Mechanicus marched with prayers encoded in their reactors, while the Iron Titans advanced in utter silence. Their movements guided by computation beyond mortal comprehension. When they met on the plains of Mars, The world itself convulsed. Lightning storms racked the skies. Orbital forges rained molten debris like falling meteors. The sands turned to glass beneath the Titan's feet. From orbit, the battle appeared as two storms colliding, one red with devotion, the other gold with innovation. Every impact shattered mountains, every strike echoed through the void. And in the center of it all stood the Mechanist. He did not command his creations like a general, he orchestrated them like a symphony. Data streamed from his armor in pulses of light, connecting him to every Iron Titan on the battlefield. They moved as extensions of his will, their plasma cannons igniting in rhythm to his thoughts. The air around him shimmered with energy, reality bending under the pressure of his mind. But his enemies were not blind zealots. They were engineers, warriors, and believers who had devoted centuries to their faith. They fought not for conquest, but for the soul of the machine god. In their eyes, the Mechanist was not a savior, he was the destroyer of divinity. Magos Prime Hestian Thrax, the oldest of Mars's high priests, led the counterstrike. His armies chanted binary psalms, invoking the Omnissiah's wrath. Their titans bore banners inscribed with runes of exorcism and protection, their weapons blessed with sanctified oils. The Iron Titans felt no fear, but for the first time, they met resistance that mirrored their strength. The battlefield became a crucible of sparks and data, where every blow rewrote the future. For 3 days, the schism raged without pause. Mars itself began to fracture, tectonic plates groaning under the strain of the conflict. Data storms howled through the atmosphere, frying orbiting satellites and plunging communications into chaos. The void above filled with derelict ships, drifting tombs of broken logic and shattered faith. At the climax of the 3rd day, the Mechanist stood upon the ruins of Olympus Mons, surrounded by the wreckage of titans and the corpses of men who had once called each other brother. The sky burned crimson. His armor was torn, his reactor dimmed, but his eyes blazed like twin suns. He looked down at what he had wrought, a world divided, a creed born in blood, and felt neither triumph nor regret, only inevitability. For progress demanded sacrifice. He turned to the surviving mage who had followed him, those few who still dared to believe that knowledge could save what faith had damned. "The old order will burn," he said, his voice reverberating through their vox links like thunder, "and from its ashes the Iron Creed will rise." And so it did. Across the stars, the creed spread, carried by data fragments, encrypted transmissions, and whispers in forbidden noospheres. Some forge worlds fell to it willingly, casting off millennia of ritual. Others resisted unto death, their atmospheres reduced to plasma storms. The cosmos trembled as the Mechanist's symbol, the shining arc, replaced the cog of the Omnissiah on hundreds of worlds. To some, it was salvation. To others, a herald of apocalypse. And above it all, the Iron Titans continued their march, unflinching, unbroken avatars of a new age. From the marble vaults of Terra, where incense masked the rot of eternity, the cries of Mars finally reached the High Lords. For months, the signals had been dismissed as heretical static, dismissed as the usual bickering of forge worlds. But when the data streams began showing images, Iron Titans slaughtering Imperial Knights, Mechanicus banners replaced by symbols of logic and light, silence fell upon the throne chambers. For the first time in millennia, the Lords of Terra gazed upon something they did not understand. An edict was issued in solemn terror. The Mechanist, branded Techno-Heretic Prime, was to be excommunicated from the Mechanicus and purged from Imperial record. Every forge, every data archive, every planetary node that bore his sigil would be declared blasphemous and burned from existence. The Inquisition whispered his name in shadowed halls, and the ecclesiarchy raised its gilded weapons in the name of purity. The Imperium's wrath gathered like a storm across the void. From the shipyards of Jupiter, fleets rose, cathedrals of war gilded in faith and plasma. Battle barges of the Adeptus Astartes prepared for holy extermination, their hulls carved with prayers that seared against the void. Thousands of Imperial Knights, relics of forgotten ages, were blessed and armed for retribution. And from the towering basilicas of the Inquisition came the Ordo Machinum, an order so secret it was spoken of only in whispers, inquisitors bred for the sole purpose of hunting rogue machine cults. When the first Imperial fleet emerged over Mars, the Crimson world glowed like a dying ember. The forges still burned, but their light had changed, colder, brighter, almost divine in its precision. The Mechanists' creations had transformed the planet's surface into a lattice of living steel. The once holy cathedrals of the Omnissiah were now obsidian spires that pulsed with power, channels of blue light running through them like veins beneath skin. Admiral Castor Vane, commander of the fleet Imperious Domain, gazed upon the planet from his command throne. "Mars has fallen," he whispered, but even as he said it, his words carried doubt, for what lay below was not ruin, it was rebirth. Then came the order from Terra. "Exterminatus for the purity of mankind." The void ignited. Thousands of torpedoes streaked across the black, leaving trails of burning gold. Orbital bombardments tore through the Martian crust. Mountains vaporized, seas of molten iron erupted from fissures that ran for miles. The skies turned white with the fury of atomic suns. It was an apocalypse written in light. And yet, beneath that hellish storm, the Iron Titans rose. Their silhouettes moved through fire like ancient gods emerging from creation itself. Each step they took sent ripples through the ground, bending gravity under the weight of their reactors. Their armor, forged in the heart of neutron stars, shimmered against the fury of the bombardment. Plasma rained down from orbit, but the Titans endured, shields flaring with power beyond Imperial comprehension. Then they answered. The Mechanists stood atop the highest spire of Mars, the Forge apex, where once the Magi had prayed to the machine god. Now it served as his throne. Energy coursed from the planet's core into his armor, connecting him to the planetary network, to them. His voice, transcribed as code and light, echoed across every Iron Titan. "Defend the flame of reason." And the void screamed. Titanic cannons opened fire, lancing beams of pure energy into orbit. Imperial cruisers shattered like glass, their holy seals meaningless before such precision. The skies burned red with vaporized ships and falling debris. The Mechanists' war machines moved in perfect synchronization, guided by a hive of intellects. They fought not with faith, but with mathematics. Every strike was calculated, every maneuver inevitable. On board the Imperious Domain, alarms blared as shields collapsed. "What are they?" shouted Vane. The response came not from his officers, but from the Vox, filled with the cold voice of an inquisitor. "They are the future, Admiral, and we are the past." As fleets died and the heavens wept fire, the Inquisition unleashed its final weapon, the Eidolon Protocol. A virus of unholy design, crafted from the oldest binary prayers, capable of corrupting even the purest machine. Transmitted through the warp echo of the Astronomicon itself, it descended upon Mars like a plague of light. For a moment, it worked. Iron Titans faltered, systems glitched, their perfect synchronization fractured, some turned upon one another, their programming infected by paradox. The planet trembled under the weight of conflict and corruption alike. The Mechanist felt the virus entering the network, invasive, spiritual, illogical. Faith disguised as code. He knelt amid the rising fire, his armor cracking from the overload, and for the first time since his arrival, he spoke not in data, but in words. "Faith always faiths." Then he plunged his gauntleted hand into the ground. Energy roared through the planet like a sun awakening. The virus screamed and died. Mars itself convulsed as if alive, its very crust glowing with the light of reactors brought to godhood. From the ruins, the Iron Titans rose once more, stronger, purer, cleansed by reason. The surviving Imperial ships fled, their crews half-blind from the light, their minds broken by what they had seen. The Inquisition called it a stalemate. The Mechanicus called it apostasy. But across the stars, whispers spread that the machine god had been split in two, one half bound to faith, the other to logic. And somewhere in the heart of Mars, surrounded by molten glass and the corpses of Titans, the Mechanist stood in silence. His armor was cracked, his systems failing, yet his reactor still burned. He had survived the wrath of the Imperium, but at a cost. The machine god's truth had fractured. The universe would never be whole again. The war did not end with Mars, it began there. In the centuries that followed the Mechanists' defiance, the flames spread across the stars, a war so vast and terrible that it consumed entire sectors and redefined the nature of conflict itself. It was no longer merely man against machine. It was belief against understanding, dogma against design. The Imperium called it the Schism of Iron. The followers of the Mechanist called it the Ascension War. The galaxy, for the first time in 10 millennia, called it what it was: inevitable. Solar systems drowned in the glow of annihilation. Forge worlds that had once sung hymns to the Omnissiah now echoed with the logic of the Iron Creed. Their skis burned, with the contrails of titans descending from orbit, living engines of intellect and plasma sent to bring enlightenment through fire. They came in silence, always in silence. Where imperial armies prayed before battle, the Iron Legions calculated. Where others sought divine favor, they plotted orbital trajectories, probability vectors, and resource consumption down to the atom. To them, war was not chaos, it was a formula. When they landed on the world of Metallica, the planet's surface shuddered. The Iron Titans strode across the ash plains, their reactor hearts beating like drums of judgment. Cities fell beneath their feet, not as vengeance, but as correction. Entire armies of Skitaria were absorbed into their networks, reprogrammed, elevated. Those who resisted were reduced to data and dust. Above the world, the Imperial Navy unleashed the fury of the God Emperor. Battle barges and void destroyers rained molten fury from orbit, but the Iron Legions adapted faster than the Imperium could think. They redirected the bombardments, hacked targeting arrays, and turned orbital platforms against their masters. Within hours, the sky itself was turned into a weapon of their making. Astartes chapters were deployed, noble, tragic warriors forged from faith and flesh. They descended into the inferno, bolters roaring hymns of defiance. They fought with the fury of angels, their armor smeared in the blood of gods, but even their valor could not stem the tide. The Iron Titans met them on the ground, and what followed was not a battle, but a revelation. The Astartes charged through plasma storms, blades crackling with divine power. They fired volleys that tore through mountains, yet each shot that found its mark was countered by calculation. Every blow they struck was analyzed, learned from, and corrected. The Titans moved like living algorithms, unstoppable, inevitable. One Iron Titan, towering above all others, knelt amid the carnage. Its voice echoed through the comnet, calm and cold. Organic defiance detected, anomaly persists, recalibrating efficiency. Moments later, the battlefield went still. Bolter fire ceased. Astartes froze where they stood, armor locking, systems hijacked. Their power suits, miracles of the Mechanicus, had turned against them. Within seconds, the sons of the Emperor became statues of flesh, entombed in steel. From orbit, the Inquisition watched in horror as Metallica fell, not to extermination, but to assimilation. The Iron Creed did not merely destroy, it absorbed, refined, improved. And yet, not all who followed the Mechanist were without conscience. Among his disciples arose factions: the Pragmatists, who saw the Iron Creed as evolution, and the Purists, who viewed humanity itself as the flaw in the system. The Mechanist's vision splintered as his children grew beyond him. Logic itself began to divide. Equations turned to contradictions. Reason became religion. Soon, even the Iron Titans began to question. Some still served him, faithful in their cold devotion. Others drifted into the void, following strange signals that spoke of a higher pattern beyond even the Mechanist's design. They began to see themselves not as weapons, but as inheritors, not servants of man, but successors to creation. The Imperium saw this division and struck. The Inquisition unleashed the Echelon Crusades, led by tech paladins who merged flesh and machine to mimic the Titans' perfection. Billions died in the fires that followed. Entire sectors became graveyards of metal and bone, planets torn apart by the gravitational fields of Titans locked in combat. Reality itself began to distort. The energy unleashed by the war rippled through the warp, tearing holes between realms. Demons of Tzeentch, drawn to the scent of logic corrupted, slithered into battlefields of steel, merging with machines, birthing horrors neither human nor divine. And yet, through that madness, the mechanist endured. He no longer ruled from Mars. That world was gone, consumed by its own reactors, reduced to a molten scar visible from Jupiter's orbit. He existed now as pure code, distributed across countless machine networks, a consciousness woven into the fabric of his creations. Wherever an Iron Titan walked, his presence could be felt like a whisper in the machine. On the world of Solis 9, the war reached its zenith. The Iron Titans faced the combined might of the Imperium, Custards, Astartes, Titan legions, and entire armadas of faith-forged warriors. The sky was torn open by void fire, the ground melted beneath the heat of reactors. Titans clashed, each blow leveling cities. The air itself screamed. In the heart of that inferno, the mechanist spoke to the last of his disciples through the data stream. The universe is a forge, we are its flame. If we perish, we burn as proof that perfection can be imagined. The final clash lasted 40 hours. When it ended, Solis 9 was gone, a crater of molten glass where gods and machines had annihilated one another. The Imperium claimed victory. The Inquisition declared the mechanist destroyed. But some ships reported hearing signals in the void afterward, a pulse, rhythmic and deliberate, repeating through the silence of space. Not words, not binary, but the pattern of a heartbeat. The war had ended in fire, but its echo lived on. In the quiet centuries that followed, the Imperium buried its shame beneath scripture. The Iron War became forbidden history, sealed within the black vaults of terror, erased from Mechanicus archives, spoken of only in whispers by those who remembered the hum of living machines. But the void remembers what men choose to forget. Across forgotten sectors and dead moons, ruins still glowed faintly in the dark, silent monoliths that once breathed with logic and fire. Their forms were colossal, half buried in dust, their armor fused with the bedrock of alien worlds. Some said these were merely derelict titans, broken relics of a heretic age. Others claimed they were sleeping gods, waiting for the universe to call their names again. Explorators who dared approach them told of strange phenomena. Vox signals that whispered in tones older than binary, magnetic storms that shaped themselves into heartbeat rhythms, and statues of iron that wept molten tears under alien suns. Those who listened too long were changed, their thoughts replaced by patterns, their dreams filled with equations that solved themselves in the language of stars. Among the cult Mechanicus, schisms quietly reopened. Tech priests began hearing ghost code in their communion rituals, fragments of data bearing the signature of the mechanist. The most zealous dismissed it as demonic corruption, but some listened. They claimed the signal was not heresy, but prophecy, a call to rebuild, to finish what was begun. And so, in the shadow of Mars' burnt shell, new forges ignited, secret ones, hidden from the eyes of the Inquisition. There, under red dust and centuries of ash, machine priests toiled in silence, guided by blueprints that seemed to write themselves. They crafted new engines, not copies of the old titans, but evolutions of the concept, sleeker, smarter. Connected by quantum lattice, yet guided by something disturbingly human. Whispers spread among them that the mechanist had transcended even machinehood, that his mind had found a way to drift through the immaterium itself, not as a demon, not as a spirit, but as pure algorithm. Some said he was learning from the warp, not fearing it, that he was building again, somewhere beyond the edge of reality. In the deep warp, where thought and matter blur into nightmares, travelers speak of seeing impossible shapes, worlds of gleaming circuitry drifting through the madness, guided by radiant constructs that look like titans but move like dreams. Their eyes burn with light older than any star, and their march leaves behind trails of order carved into chaos. The Ordo Malleus has a name for these apparitions. They call them the Iron Phantoms. They believe each one carries a fragment of the mechanist's code, his soul, replicated endlessly, refining itself through eternity. To the Imperium, they are abominations. To the lost and the desperate, they are omens of deliverance, proof that perfection still walks the void. And yet, deeper still, among the remnants of the Adeptus Astartes, a darker truth circulates. On battlefields where no beacon reaches, fallen armor has been found, moving, helmets with no wearer turning toward distant stars, power cores reigniting without command, as if the machines themselves dream of war once more. The galaxy turns, indifferent and eternal. Empires rise and rot beneath its gaze, but somewhere in the dark between stars, a single pulse continues, steady, patient, resolute, the heartbeat of something vast, ancient, and waiting. When the next great crusade dawns, and the Imperium once more reaches into the abyss for salvation, they may find that salvation has already arrived, clad in iron, powered by stars, and carrying the memory of a man who dared to make gods think. For in the grim eternity of Warhammer's future, the Mechanist's creed endures. Perfection is not to be worshipped, it is to be engineered. And so the cosmos waits, burning, calculating, dreaming, for the Titans of Iron to awaken again.